Listen, I hope you guys are ready. We're gonna dive into this. I've already had him on my podcast. He's just a phenomenal all around man. I respect him to a high degree because he practices what he preaches. He's just a great friend. He and I've just hit it off in the short period that we've known each other. But this is Dr. Johnny Parker. He is an executive coach. He's a leadership consultant. He is a professor at Johns Hopkins University. He's worked with pro athletes, leaders, teams, organizations to help them win at work and thrive in life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is in his bio. He didn't put that once he heard how the title of this summit was called Win at Work and or Succeed at Work and Win in Life. That's in his bio, that he helps people win at work and thrive in life. He and his wife have helped former coaches of the Washington Redskins, Pittsburgh Steelers. They have a phenomenal platform called Turn the Page, which has helped numerous leaders and organizations. From NFL teams, NBA, Chick-fil-A, AOL, just to name a few. And look, I can go on and on and on about him. He's got a beautiful wife and children. He's got a beautiful family. And one of the reasons why I thought he was a perfect fit, because not only does he embody the things that I talk about in terms of elite men, but he's also got a program called the 10X Better Man. And listen, guys, I believe all of us are doing our best to try to be our best. Some of us just may not have the tools in the toolbox, or we just may not have the examples around us. This is somebody you want to listen to. Take out your pen and pad. Dr. Johnny Parker, what's going on, man? I'm excited.
Hey, sir. Dr. Brad, great to be back with you, my friend. Always a treat, and it's always a good time, great time when we get together, get to talk like this.
Listen, man, I appreciate it. You have a wealth of wisdom, man. It's one of the reasons why I respect you so much. Let's briefly talk about 10X Better Man. I want the men to be aware of that. It's a platform that you use that is a framework for how men can be better men, 10X Better Men. Can you just kind of give us a summary of what that was? Because when we spoke about this on the podcast, I was just learning about it. I love the idea of it. So many guys who've listened to it have been blessed by it, and I don't want these men to miss out on it. So give us a little summary about it.
Yeah, so 10X Better Man, it's a holistic concept, and it's an acrostic, and it uses the language that's distinctively male, and the acrostic is sperm. Every man knows about that. Don't forget that, right?
That's right.
So that stands for this. The S in sperm stands for spiritual. The P stands for physical. The E stands for emotional. The R is relational. The M is mental. And we added another M, Dr. Brad, for monetary. And those are the 6 critical areas of a man's life. It's who he is spiritually, physically, emotionally, relationally, mentally, and monetarily. And so it's important that we talk about 10X. It comes from the Bible. It comes from the from God's word, where in the book of Daniel, it says of King Nebuchadnezzar, who's this very impulsive, arrogant leader, king, who has a disturbing dream, and none of his leadership team could solve the dream. And Daniel, who is wise in the technologies of his day, young man, is able to interpret the dream, and his friends support him as they process the king's dream. And the king, Nebuchadnezzar, says this of Daniel and his friends, that Daniel and his friends were 10 times better than my consultants, my leadership team, if you will, using modern day vernacular in terms of leadership. And think about that, true. And think about in business. Business exists to solve a problem. And ever you are in business, and if you want to be a consultant, you want to be a coach, whatever, and you want to do it at a high level, start solving problems. Because Daniel was able to solve a problem, he was promoted to governor, and he did it at a 10x level. And so 10 is significant also, Dr. Brad, because 10 in the Bible is about completion. It's about maturity. We got the 10 commandments, which really the 10 commandments are really the win commandments, W-I-N. As we follow them, they help us to win in life, not lose in life, W-I-N. The 10 commandments are the win commandments. And so So we have that. The number 10, 10 is completion, 10 is maturity. So it's helping men develop this 10x mindset and who a man is spiritually 10x, physically 10x, emotionally, relationally, mentally, and monetarily. And so that's the goal there. And we define it as a man called to live above average to the glory of God.
Here's why I like it so much. There's this level of intention with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To where we're paying attention to these different areas of our life, and even though, and I'm just thinking about this as we're talking, even though we've identified them as separate, they really help one another, right? The
Yeah,
spiritual helps the physical, which helps the emotional. Like they're really connected.
they are.
We talk about them in separate categories, but here's what I know in my own life is that when I think about this framework, or the fact that a lot of guys have a framework. I mean, many of the people who I've interviewed who are succeeding at a high level in work and life, they have a framework with which how they see their life and making sure that things are getting that are not getting neglected, right? So it's like, what is my 10x plan emotionally? What is my 10x plan relationally? What is my 10x plan mentally? The important thing I like about the intention is if any one of these get completely neglected, it's probably going to affect one or the other. They're
Absolutely.
equally connected, don't you think?
Absolutely. Domino effect.
Uh,
Domino effect. It really is. And that's what I saw in my own life. I felt like I was growing in faith, but I was terrible with money. I would be an impulsive spender. I made financial decisions or business decisions. I was terrible with money. So I was 10xing in my faith, but I was 1xing with finances. You
right.
see how that works? And I was 10xing in faith, and there was a time in my marriage where I was 1xing in my marriage. And so the goal is, because here's the deal: no man dreams of living an average life.
Mm,
No man dreams of that. Men want to 10x, but men have issues with shame that I'm not enough, imposter syndrome. I just talked to a leader of a major company that we all would know just yesterday, and he's probably going to resign Monday because he's really wrestling with shame and imposter syndrome that I'm not enough. But that's not unique to him. That's so common for so many men because they don't have confidence. They don't dream of being average and they want to be above average, but they struggle with having a system, having the right framework, or they get driven by shame and daddy pain that what they start, they're not able to sustain because it's built on a faulty framework and a faulty foundation.
so let me ask you this question. Do you feel that successful men, we're talking to a lot of men who are probably, successful, however you want to define that, in what they do for their career here. Um, the things that we're talking about, is it are successful men exempt from this?
That's a great question. It depends on how you define success. So here's the deal. So again, in my turn the page book and my turn the page system, we talk about this metaphor, Dr. Brad, of the front stage and the backstage.
Mm,
Well, on the front stage, many men can appear very successful. They look
yes.
pretty good. They look really good on social media. They look really good on LinkedIn. So on the front stage, a man can be productive. A man could have the right appearance. A man could have accomplished much. A man could be a part of the right fraternity. A man could have who he knows, what he does, and what he owns. He could have all the front stage trappings and appearance of success. But the true test, and not that those things are bad or
Right.
wrong,
Right.
but the true test is what's happening in a man's backstage
Mm,
and how a man answers three core questions, Dr. Brad. And what are they? Who am I? That's identity.
mm,
What do I want? That's impact. Why do I want it? That's intent. See, the backstage is the true self of the man. The backstage is you getting at the man's soul, the deepest part of who he is. And these questions emanate from the soul. And if a man is only focused on the front stage of productivity,
yep.
appearance, who I know, what I own, what I do, because we do that. We meet each other as men, So what do you do? And it's another way of sizing is what's your worth,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Where did you go to school? Where did you pledge?
Right.
We ask all those front stage questions because sometimes we just don't know what else to talk about. But
Right.
rarely do we ask questions about how is it with your soul. No one asks that question.
Right.
What's the quality of your marriage? Men don't ask those kind of questions.
Right. Right.
They're terrified of those kind of questions. What's your relationship with your father? So those are backstage questions of my soul and my transparency,
Mm.
and so that's what the core is, and that's what I mean. Dr. Brad, Jason Bourne tore up most of Europe trying to figure out this stuff. With I mean, man. And guess what? I'm from New York. He tore up part of Manhattan too. Yeah, Jason Bourne killing people trying to figure it. I mean, he tore up. They made six. How many of those Bourne
Oh, dude,
little things?
supremacy,
Yeah,
identity.
exactly. He's
It's
tearing up. He tore up most of Europe and part of New York trying to get the answer to these questions. And
That's
how many did that?
hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something, man. And and if a man doesn't answer these questions
Yes.
and doesn't get really serious about the backstage of where his story emanates, a man will commit what I call soul abuse.
Uh,
It's the silent killer.
let's talk about that real quick. I know you're about to dive in. Here's the deal. This was me. I mean, you're describing me.
Yeah,
Very successful as a doctor. At the time was one of the assistant team physicians for a pro basketball team. I mean, we talking about dreams had come true, but I'm failing as a father, as a husband. I'm living dual lives. I'm making poor decisions, but I'm high achieving. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out how did I become the most successful, making the most money and the most influence I've ever had, but I'm just completely unfulfilled, you know? And that's who I want to talk to in this summit, the guys who are there. We do such a good job of hiding it so well, Dr. Johnny. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of high achieving men, successful men, a lot of people feel like, well, you got it figured out. So nobody's really talking to these guys who are secretly struggling because they have to keep the facade going. They got to keep the story going of what society thinks about us, having it all figured out. So if we don't become congruent with the front stage and these backstage questions, what happens?
Well, we commit soul abuse, and it's a terrible thing to succeed at something that doesn't really matter.
Mm.
It's a terrible thing to succeed at something that doesn't really matter. And Brad, that's your story is my story, man. I'm 58 years old, and I can think I was in the 20s. A man in his 20s, in my turn the page book, I talk about it's about discovery, and a man starts to discover some things about himself. He starts to discover some pain points or some gaps and some desires, and so that's discovery time. And I see my sons who are right in that phase of trying to figure out who I am, what I want, kind of thing. The 30s in a man's life can be a very driven decade. How do I go as fast as I can, do as much as I can to be as successful as I can? That decade about killed me when I got to my 40s.
Mm.
Because in my 30s, Dr. Brad, I wrote my first book, and it was a good best-selling book. I'm in Cayman Islands. I'm speaking. I'm on BET. I'm on CNN. I'm making money. But then I ran into a wall. Like you, I began to battle with panic attacks. I
Mm.
began to battle with depression. I began to say, I'm making money and I'm traveling, but I'm unfulfilled.
Mm.
I'm ready to have an affair. I
Yeah.
got a beautiful wife. I'm ready to have an affair. I'm out of control. And so I began to see a therapist and to figure out what is wrong with me. And then as I'm approaching 40s, I'm realizing, oh, wow, I'm halfway to 80. And that began to mess with me because what happens is when a man gets into his 40s, so 20s discovery, 30s drivenness,
Mhm.
40s disillusionment.
Mm.
Because when a man gets to his 40s, what happens, Dr. Brad, is this testosterone, physiological, all it's like the perfect storm, the worst storm. Everything comes together in a terrible way if
Right.
he's not careful. Because he gets to his 40s, testosterone takes a hit. It affects his mood. That affects his ability to have an erection.
Mm.
Serious. Okay.
No.
We start
Yeah.
losing our hair. We start
Yeah.
losing muscle mass. You know, you're a physician. And
Yes.
so, this is built on on a fragile emotional foundation because most men don't grow up talking about their emotions.
No, man.
You know, we can have a sister. My sister can fall down, scrape her knee. It's okay for her to cry. She's expected to cry. You and I fall down as 5-year-old little boys. We could be a broken leg. You better get up, sissy, faggot, punk. We get
Yep.
shamed.
Yep.
Take
Yep.
that 5, 10, 15, 20. You're 25 years old. You meet a woman or you're talking and someone asks you what you're feeling. You haven't had a feeling in 20 years. You don't know what you're feeling. And the only
Mm.
emotion that a man will admit to, and it's okay in a man's world, is anger. I'll say, I'm angry as hell. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's it. We don't say I'm scared. We
Mm.
don't say I'm sad. We don't say I'm confused. We don't say I'm lost. We say things, I got to find myself. Okay.
Yes.
So the 40s can freak you out. It's probably the most difficult decade. And so that's where I was. That was my story. And what I did, I remember it was on my 27th birthday. My wife said, "What did I want?" I said, "Honey, I simply want to go to Ocean City. We live in Maryland. It's about a 3 hour drive." I said, "I just need to be alone with God, with my Bible, with some music. I need to process. I need some reflection. Because I
Yeah.
didn't know what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just knew I was in pain. I didn't know what was wrong with me, and 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 it didn't make sense because on the front stage, I'm high performing
Yes.
according to how a man should high perform. I'm
For
I'm
sure.
the elite guy. I'm
Yes.
experiencing what most men would want. I'm working with NFL teams. I mean, I got the only job in DC. I get to work with the football team and be in the locker room and have access. I'm on a side. I have everything that guys would say they want,
Sure.
but I'm unfulfilled. And so and I go to the ocean. That's when I began to bring it back to Jason Bourne. I got to meet Matt Dillon one day because that guy, that movie has helped me. Because what I did and what I tell men to do in this exercise, I call it the Bourne identity.
Yeah.
What I do, Dr. Brad, is this. I have men, and I did this on myself, and I have men do this. Men, you're watching, listening, you want to do something like this, or I
Yes.
can
This.
help
I
you
like this.
process this. Yeah, Born identity. So what you do, you look at your decades of your life, 0 to 10. That's one column. So you have the decades in one column, and then the second column are what have been events that have happened 0 to 10. Identify 2 or 3 events that happened 0 to 10. Third column, what have been emotional themes during that decade. Okay. Fourth column, if you were to give that decade a title, what would you call
Mm.
it? And I'm telling you, when I did that in my getaway trip reflection to figure out what was going on in my backstage, I went 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 39 at the time. And what emerged from that is what emerges for a lot of men, Dr. Brad, high definition clarity. I began to see patterns. I began to see themes. I began to get clarity
Mm.
about my story. And that's when I began to call it my narrative, my story. But I had to go in the backstage. And if you know, in a theater, the backstage is dark, it's messy,
Yep.
okay? And most men avoid it.
Yep.
But when I went back there, and then and the man has to be careful who he gives an access pass to
To
his
the
backstage.
backstage. Yeah.
And I did do that. I did that with a therapist. I did that with a few men. For a long time, I didn't do that. I didn't let my wife back there. It was too dark and messy. Like, you can't come back there, girl. It's
Yeah.
dark back there. It's messy back there. I don't know what's back there. Yeah, yeah. I don't even know what's back there. I don't want us to be, running in
Oh,
and running into each other. Yeah, it was dark back there, Dr. Brad. I wasn't
I,
trying to go back there and let her back there.
right. Right. If you ain't been back there, like, look,
Yeah,
look, look. I don't. You may not come back. I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. I can't
yeah.
let
I
you.
don't know what you're gonna find back here. And I gotta know if you see some stuff that looks problematic,
Yeah.
that you ain't gonna judge your boy.
Yes.
And let me tell you a powerful story around that. When I began to do that backstage work, um, and again, back to this panic attack and depression, I had to tell my wife, Dr. Brad, I needed her to go to the dentist with me because my panic attacks would surface around any time I felt confined or claustrophobic.
Yeah.
So I had to tell her I needed her to go flying with me. That was
Mm,
real vulnerable for me
yeah.
because I'm a dude from the hood. I'm like, I'm good. I didn't want to have to need my wife emotionally.
Right.
I didn't want to be that vulnerable. And the dentist thing, anytime the dentist was going to numb me for a cavity, if and I didn't feel like I had any control,
Yes.
and I had to wait till it wore off. It was messing with my mind. I would get out of the chair. And I had to tell my dentist, I need my wife to come in here with me. And this is powerful. And I would get really emotional when we would tell the story when we do our marriage stuff. When she would go with me and hold my hand,
Mm,
I would not have an attack.
wow.
And what has to happen in a man, and faith helped me with this. God was teaching me I needed to be a backstage, vulnerable, authentic man,
Mm,
to really be truthful
mm,
about my emotions and begin to share my emotions with safe people who would not shame me, who would not judge me, because every man is not safe.
yep. No.
Okay,
No.
unfortunately, every man's not safe. You can't. But the more that I began to do that with my therapist, and that I began to do that with my wife, I mean, this was vulnerable for me. I'm a 50-year-old man at the time to tell the dentist and the dental staff my wife has to come in there and hold my hand. It's like, I'm serious. I'm like, am I a little boy or something?
Right.
But that vulnerable moment, I know I no longer am there. I can go without her today,
Yeah.
but I needed that to learn how to be a backstage, transparent, vulnerable, authentic man. And that's the power. And so what happens is the more that a man learns how to be transparent, honest about his heart, about his soul, and be vulnerable, and then if he's married or allows other safe people access to his backstage and learn some practices, and we can talk about some of those practices that can
Yeah.
help a man
Yeah.
win at work and thrive in life. Those practices now sustain the man when he goes to the front stage.
Mm,
Going to the front stage very differently. He's no longer going to the front stage driven. He's no longer going to the front stage to prove himself. He's not trying to prove that his sixth grade teacher was wrong about him, that daddy was wrong about him, that that all the story and the messages that he told himself that he became driven to undo.
mm,
Now when he goes to the front stage, he's listen to this. He's going to the front stage from love
mm.
and not for love.
That's so big. And I'll be transparent because this is something that I've recently been wrestling with and come to the conclusion of is that my drivenness, my drive, I guess you can say, was in an attempt to validate my worth,
Yeah, no question.
right?
Absolutely.
And it's
Right
and
on.
it's and here's the deal, Dr. John, it's a tough pill to swallow, right? Because you only know who you are for so long. It's like this is me though. Like I go after stuff, and I think this was a tough question to answer of like, hey, why are you doing this? Very simple question. Like why are you going after the things you're going after? And I came to the conclusion like I think there's a selfish motive. That's a tough pill to swallow, but I'm in a better place to where I'm like, but that's a good thing because now once you have self-awareness, you can start to figure it out. And I think that's what a lot of us are, man. I mean, I think we're trying to hide some of the stuff that we got with, man, let me just achieve my way to feeling better. Let me just work harder and I'll be better. You mentioned some of the tactics. You talk about the front stage and the backstage. Um, we could also say the success at work, fulfillment in life. Um, I used to look at those things as two separate things, right? My success and my fulfillment. As I've grown over the last several years, I've seen that they're really codependent. If anything, really, the success and the things that I'm going for are so dependent on the backstage. So the front stage is really dependent on the backstage. The success is really dependent on the fulfillment. And I didn't know that. I just thought you just work, 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 work. And I was wearing myself out. It was coming at the cost of my family, my faith, my physical health. Once I started taking care of, and all I'm saying is validating exactly what you're saying. When I started paying attention to the backstage, the front stage didn't have nearly the pressure. Uh, the front stage was a lot smoother. Um, Times that things didn't go as planned, which by the way, you can plan on things not going planned,
Yeah, that's right.
was a lot more doable. Um, and my fear was that if I double down on this fulfillment, man, I'm not gonna be as successful, right? Like I'm giving it up. Let's talk about that. The things that people can do to take care of the backstage so that the front stage can be better. Because I think guys are probably thinking like, I don't want to give up the front stage. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. And we're not saying about the front stage. We're saying, to your point, the front stage matters.
Yes.
Accomplishment, productivity, making sales if you're in business, front stage, all that matters. But the point is, the backstage matters more, and to have a healthy, robust front stage, you got to have a healthy, deep backstage.
Mm.
So, like yesterday, I did a training for an organization, CEOs across America, for this organization, the C-suite, and I had them do an exercise where you had to draw a picture of a tree. I gave them 1 minute to do it. Then I asked them the question. I said, "How many drew your tree with roots?" They said, "Hardly any of them did it. Some did." I said, "Well, so they got the point. So why didn't you do it?" "Well, you don't see it. You ignore it. So how did your tree grow? Your tree just you got all this flourishing and leaves. You better
Wow.
have some roots. Backstage is the roots. So we see the front stage of the tree and the leaves. Same thing with the house. Okay, a house got to be on a foundation. The backstage is the foundation. You got to go deep. If you're going to go high and building a building, you got to go deep in the backstage in order to
Mm.
have a tall building. So if you're going to have high impact, you got to have downtime. You got to go deep in terms of building the foundation. So that's what we're saying. So we're not ignoring the front stage, but you got to be grounded.
Mm.
So one of the most practical things is one exercise that I have men do that's important for men to do. And again, it's in my Turn the Page book, is this: a practical exercise to move from theory to practice. We start to do something where you have to do this. We call it our core values assessment.
Mhm.
So, and the way you do it to make it real, you use your name. So I'll model it. So you use your last name, and it's an acrostic. So for us, it's Parker's, and you can use your first name or last name. We use it. We use our last name, and so the P stands for pleasing God. The A stands for accepting one another. The R stands for respecting one another. The K stands for keeping short accounts. The E stands for encouraging one another. The other R stands for renewal, and the S stands for service. So research shows, Dr. Brad, when we lead from our core values,
Mm.
that becomes your narrative. That becomes your story. That your impact, check it out. You want high performance? The person who leads from their core values are over 110% more effective and
Mm.
the leader than the man who lacks that data.
Mm.
That's as practical. So I tell men, you want to do that.
So here's the question: how many men do you find who are high achieving that know what their core values
They don't.
are? Mm.
They don't. Because many of them, what's happened, many of them are driven, oftentimes they're driven from pain.
Mm.
They're driven to prove themselves. Many of them are driven for daddy pain. I can't tell
Mm.
you how many men who made decisions that if they were successful on the front stage and in terms of productivity or profit or success, that daddy would say, "I'm proud of you." There's a whole lot of men who are driven and still looking for daddy's love, still
Mm.
looking for daddy's validation, daddy's approval.
Mm.
I've coached them, I've seen them,
Yeah.
I've heard them, their stories many times. So, although on the front stage they can be successful, appear successful in terms of accomplishment, many of them have left a carnage of wounded people in on the way to front stage driven success. And by the way, there's a difference between being driven and drive. We want drive. Drive is good.
Right.
Having ambition. The Bible talks about that. Do nothing from selfish ambition. The
Yes.
Bible says in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. So ambition is good.
Yes.
Selfish ambition is bad.
Mm.
So we want drive for ambition, but drivenness, that's something different. Because drivenness is oftentimes grounded or it's motivated to prove myself or to heal some backstage pain or backstage wound.
And that's what I was saying. Is that what I came to the conclusion of is like really a lot of my drive is I'm trying to be self glorified.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like why do I want? My wife and I are very different. Again, I'm gonna just be real, man. If I was watching this, like, man, look, I want the house, the car, I want it all, right? The material stuff. But you got to stop and think. It's like, why do I want this? And I came to the conclusion that, dude, this is just for me. But the other part of that is I found myself coming to the conclusion that I'm my most fulfilled, Dr. Johnny, when I'm serving. I am my most fulfilled when I am serving. And it's unique because we want to be successful, but we take our eyes off what it takes to be there, which I've come to understand is service. You know, and nothing's wrong, like you said. I think with drive, with going to something. But where's your intent? Where's your heart? And now it's just all about service. You know, I trust. Look, everything Dr. Johnny's talking about, you guys, is right. Um, I came to the conclusion in different ways, but I'm at this place where I'm the most fulfilled I've ever been. My wife and I have a phenomenal relationship. I got a great relationship with my kids. Um, my pillars of life are not, you know, on the back burner, and which really means they're being neglected. Like, I address my health, my wealth, my faith, my family, all these things. Um, but I've doubled down on the fulfillment. I've doubled down on the backstage. I've doubled down on the foundation. I've doubled down on the roots, which I've come to understand we neglect because either we can't see them or many of us just don't know how that they are connected, man. I just don't, I think a lot of guys, if they knew better, they would do
Absolutely, Dr. Brad. And you hit it. Research shows that when people are givers, when people
better.
are servers in the life and the story of others, it does cause us to feel greater fulfillment. That's the deepest fulfillment. And the problem was for me, I was so selfish in my story. I was like a lot of guys. What do guys do? The wives, if they're married, and the wives are like, "You always doing, you always going, you're always busy all the time." Girl, I'm doing this for the family. Come on, man. Isn't that the man's famous last words? I'm doing this for the family. No, you're doing this for you.
Yeah,
Let's
man.
be honest about that. And it
Yeah.
makes sense. I'm doing this for the family. And so yeah. And that's the aura in sperm, relational.
Yeah.
The more that I have a mindset to help others win, like what you're doing with the summit, helping men win. This is so needed. And the more that I have a mindset to be a walking lemonade stand, to bring refreshment to
Mm.
my wife, to my sons. Well, I call that the double narrative win. It's the double narrative win. You say, what does that mean? Basically, the same skills that I need to love my wife for 31 years of trust, of courageous conversations, of culture, of core values, of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Hmm.
All of those things I have in my marriage, guess what? I have in my work with my consulting work.
Mm.
I help teams build trust, core values, culture, courageous conversations, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've been learning that for 31 years. So it's a double narrative. It's a double narrative win. You need those same skills in your relationships, in your marriage, if you're married, or as a dad, and you need them in your work. And that's how you win in life and thrive in business, thrive in life and win in business. But you bring both. We just won a big, can't say won it, but I'm coaching a black executive in this Fortune 500 company. He's the highest level, highest ranking black, and so he brought this work with Fortune 500 company to me. And I'm telling you, what I'm bringing to them in my turn to pay system, I've had this double narrative, Dr. Brad, of winning and thriving in life and in business for 31 years. I've been doing this with my wife and my sons. We've
Mm,
done this core values thing I just gave you. I do that with companies all the time. I'm constantly reminding them, you got to keep going that. And this is what I say to men, you got to keep going back to your core.
mm,
Who am I? What do I want? Why do I want it? Do the acrostic. What is my last name? Craft your core values. And you want to continue to go back to your core so you can flow.
mm.
So you can
So
flow.
for those of you who are listening and not watching, he's got a couple water bottles that say core and flow, both of which look like he drunk all that water.
Exactly.
Guy's very healthy, rides bikes and all kind of stuff like that. Um, yeah, man, they're just not different, right? Like I think guys, we think about ourselves in the workplace different than we do at home, and the reality is this incongruence. I keep coming back to the word. I remember just feeling incongruent. I was one person, again, to just bring it all home. I was one person front stage, a different person backstage. And I remember talking to a leader who was saying, if that continues to happen, at some point those worlds collide in a bad way. Like if you're trying to be a great leader or a certain leader at work, but you're not that person at home, or vice versa, like at some point there's gonna be a collision of those two areas. And so no, man. I mean, the benevolent leader who's inspiring and leading out of love, but holding people accountable and doing that has to be the same husband, has to be the same father, has to be the same friend, right? Um, and the more congruent we are, and that, like you said, that just comes from a core. That just comes from the seed that with which everything else, comes out of. And we can't compartmentalize. I mean, we do for the sake of explanation, I think, for the sake of people understanding, but these things are not separate. They are not, that compartmentalized, that one does not connect or influence the other. And once I think we can understand that, that's just another piece of the puzzle to getting work and life right. Again, we say work and life, but really it's life.
Yes. It's life. It's life.
It's life, and I think conversations like this need to continue to be had. I appreciate you coming on here, sharing your wisdom. Man, you and me can talk for hours when
Yeah.
it comes to this stuff, man.
Yeah.
Last question, man. There's a man who's, I'm sure, watching this. They're starting to become self-aware that something's got to change. Like, very probably very similar to where you and I were. In essence, I'm asking you to talk to the Dr. Johnny back then, who was very high achieving, very driven, but unfulfilled. Is where I was, right? Um, what would you tell this person if you could just tell him one thing uh, to get him going in the right direction? What would you tell
I would tell him and I would ask him the question, the same question, the first question in the Bible
him?
that God asked Adam, where are you?
Mm,
I would ask him. And I would hope that that man would answer truthfully and be transparent and have humility. You can't turn the page to a better story until you own the current story. And the way you do it is you take fearless ownership of your narrative, your story, through humility.
mm,
I would tell him that. I would tell him the story also of my dad, whose story started horribly when he was married to my mom and ended up divorcing. But he turned the page through humility. He owned what happened. He got honest with God, honest with himself, honest with other people. And after 36 years of divorce, I remarried my mother and father 15 years ago.
wow.
I would tell him that story, that there's hope and the power of humility. That 8-letter word, humility, is the game changer to getting unstuck and move to a high performing, better story.
Mm. Dr. Johnny, you blessed me as you did in the past. I'm grateful to have you as a friend. I'm grateful to have you as what I like to consider a mentor. Whether you see that or not, that's how I see it. Because you pour into me every time we talk. Um, Man, I really appreciate you. Thank you for your contribution to what we're doing to try to help the men who are going to be, tuning into the summit. And I wish nothing but blessings for you, man.
Oh, same here, Dr. Brad. I'm so grateful that God has brought our paths, and I'm enjoying also our times of fellowship and talking like this.